Hello, everyone, and good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to today's webinar on Marie Sklodowska-Curie Reaktion Postdoctoral Fellowship 2026 Application Advice, brought to you by Euraccess Australia and New Zealand. And this is a follow-up webinar where we previously had a webinar on introductory session where we explained the eligibility conditions, key features of the postdoctoral fellowship on 6th May. It is wonderful to see such sustained interest from participants joining us from all over the world. We have interest from almost 450 registrants today, which is amazing. Please allow me to introduce our esteemed guest speakers for today. First of all, we are delighted to have with us Professor Sarah Teasley, who is a professor of design at RMIT University and is also an expert evaluator for the MSCA postdoctoral fellowships. And today, Sarah will guide us through the evaluation process and the assessment criteria used by evaluators. Thank you very much, Sarah, for joining us. We are also very pleased to welcome Ms. Cristina Gomez Cochet, who is a former Spanish MSCA national contact point and is currently the project coordinator at Euraccess Worldwide. And if you joined our previous sessions, he was our speaker then. And she will today speak about what makes a strong proposal and will provide practical guidance on completing Forms A and Forms B. And I'm Nishant Sandilia, Euraccess Worldwide Country Representative for Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific. And for those who are joining us for the first time, Euraccess is an initiative of the European Commission that addresses barriers to the mobility of researchers and enhances scientific collaboration between Europe and the rest of the world. We provide free information about European research, career opportunities, international collaboration, and networking possibilities. And as I always like to say, since all of you are joining us online today, I'd also encourage you to please follow Euraccess Australia and New Zealand on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube to stay informed about upcoming opportunities, webinars, and events that we organize. Now, I think enough of background and context. We can now begin with the actual presentation, and I'll pass the presenter privileges to you, Sarah. The floor is all yours.
Great. Thank you very, very much, Nishant. Thank you all very much for coming, and thank you for the opportunity to share some insights into the evaluation process today. So yes, it's an honor to get to share some insights with you today. I have served as an evaluator and a rapporteur for the process. Those terms will make sense in a moment, but just to say that I've had insight into some parts of the evaluation process, but not others, but can give you, I think, a very thorough understanding of how evaluation happens and some top tips for making sure that your proposal is strong based on the evaluation process. At the start, I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from the Kulin Nations, from the unceded traditional land of the Kulin Nations, and to pay respects to ancestors and elders, past and present, and to acknowledge ancestors and elders of all of the places from where you're joining us today as well. So I'll go through the evaluation process, and then I'll talk through the evaluation criteria in a decent amount of detail, and then give you a number, like I said, of top tips for a strong evaluation. So how are MCSA postdoctoral fellowship applications evaluated? This is one of the diagrams that the EU Funding and Tenders Portal online manual provides as well, which I think gives a very thorough understanding. So let me get the laser pointer out. I'll use that one. So we get your proposals. Proposals arrive online. They are then, an eligibility check is conducted to make sure that you meet the eligibility criteria. And if you haven't been at the first webinar, I would urge you to attend the first webinar so that you can make sure that you are familiar with the eligibility criteria. Internally, the proposals are then allocated to subject specialist experts. So those of you who are familiar with the Marie Sklodowska-Curie program will know that There are 8 different panels ranging across the academic disciplines and the professional areas affiliated with them. And so the proposals are allocated to experts who have been selected for their expertise in those different panel areas. There's a very robust process for selecting the experts. I can say that having been an expert, having undergone that process, and also working with the other experts, we are all selected based on a very careful scrutiny of our accomplishments to date, our subject area expertise, so that the experts, you will know that there will be subject specialist experts reviewing the proposals who may not have the exact expertise that, say, your supervisor would have or that you have, but cumulatively, they will have a very deep as well as broad expertise in the overall areas in which you are applying. And particularly in in addition to say the scientific areas in which you are applying, as experts, we also have deep knowledge of things like professional development, of impact, of dissemination, of implementation, of all of these other crucial aspects for a successful fellowship. So following the allocation of proposals to experts, each expert writes a report individually evaluating each proposal. So if your proposal came to me, for example, after I should say we undergo a very intensive training program. Experts are required to retrain every year so that if there have been any changes in the process, we're fully across that. And it's a very in-depth training. We are then that we then access the proposals and we read the proposals in relation to the criteria. And we are asked to reflect on the strengths and weaknesses of each proposal in relation to each criterion. So after we read, we discuss the weaknesses and the strengths. We aren't necessarily I should say we are looking very, very closely in relation to those criteria, as I've said. We then share those with a panel chair, with a reviewer chair. The reviewer chair then comes back to us and will ask us questions as evaluators to ensure that the evaluation process is thorough, is impartial, is fair, and that we as evaluators have fully considered every criterion. So there's quite a lot of quality assurance process that happens at this individual evaluation stage. As the slide says, this stage is ordinarily remote, so we're working remotely and then discussing with the chair. Once the chair is happy with the quality and thoroughness of each of the individual evaluation reports, we then work together as a panel of reviewers. So all of the reviewers who have viewed your application will then discuss each of our evaluations and we will come to a consensus. This is called the consensus report. This can be remote, it can be in person, but again, it's a very, very thorough discussion of each proposal and the merits of each proposal in its own right in relation to each criterion of the scoring process. This can take a number of days. It involves very intensive back and forth, discussing the relative strengths, the strengths, the gaps, and making sure that every reviewer is happy with our consensus report. This then goes to a panel. The chair takes it to a panel where the chair reports on the consensus received. And at this point, evaluation summary reports are produced, summarizing the strengths and weaknesses. These will eventually be provided to you as feedback. The panel also produces a ranked list. This list is then robustly discussed, again, taking into account both all of the criteria and also all of the guidance around fairness, around gender equality, and so on, all of the aspects set out in the application guidelines. And the final ranking list is then created, and you are then informed of the result. The top ranked proposals at that point obviously are funded. So it's a very, very robust and thorough process. which is undertaken very intensively, with a great deal of training and a great deal of support from extremely experienced reviewers. So in my experience as an expert reviewer, it is an immensely robust and an immensely holistic assessment process. Okay. Let me... So after the evaluation process has been undertaken, just a bit about the principles that we use in evaluation. And actually, let me clear all drawings for you. There we go. I mentioned that it's a very robust process. The principles that we bear in mind during evaluation as evaluators are first excellence. Projects must demonstrate a high level of quality in relation to the topics and criteria set out in the calls. We must be transparent, so funding decisions must be based on clearly defined rules and procedures. And this speaks to the evaluators follow very, very closely the guidance that is set out, and we are queried whenever it seems like we might not be, and we ensure that all assessments are following the published guidance. Applicants must also receive adequate feedback on the outcome. All proposals must be treated equally and evaluated impartially on their merits, irrespective of the origin or identity of the applicants. All applications and all proposals and related data, knowledge, and documents must be treated in confidence, so full confidentiality, and speed and efficiency. So proposals are evaluated and grants awarded and administered as swiftly as possible without compromising quality or breaking the rules. So following the published process and ensuring the highest quality of discussion and scoring is paramount, and we do that, or evaluators do that, as quickly as possible. So it is a very, very intensive and very rich process. The evaluation criteria in detail. I'm going to give you an overview first, partly because this gives the numeric breakdown. So there are 3 areas on which proposals are evaluated. Excellence. What is the project about? What is your expertise and preparedness to undertake this project? This is 50% of the score. An additional 30% is around impact. Why? Why should we do the project? What evidence do we have to collect and measure and demonstrate the project value? How much impact will the project have? And then thirdly, 20% goes to implementation. How? How will you achieve the objectives? How soundly have you thought through this? I think this breakdown is very important because obviously I'll be walking you through the criteria next, but it's important to remember that excellence is 50%, impact 30%, and implementation 20%. And this aligns very clearly with the EU, with the funding priorities around good science, which will have a public, societal, and economic impact and is conducted well for value for money and soundness. So the evaluation criteria. This, again, you can find online on the Horizon Europe Work Programme 2026-27 to Mary Sklodowska-Curie Action's website. The first, excellence. The criteria, so as you will be evaluated in an application on as I've said, a number of very specific criteria. All of these are indicated in the phrasing of this chart here. So with excellence, evaluators will be looking at the quality and the pertinence of the research and innovation objectives. To what extent are they ambitious? To what extent do they go beyond the state of the art? So in your application, it's very important to be clear, what is the state of field? Why is your project, how would the proposed research substantively shift the knowledge in the accepted knowledge in the state of the field? How is it ambitious? And so you need to balance the feasibility with the ambition. But going beyond the state of the art, and different fields will address this in different ways. In some fields, this may be more around incremental shifts. In others, it may be a greater leap. But being very clear that you show how would the proposed research shift knowledge beyond the state of the art? The objectives also need to be achievable and measurable. So I would pay attention very carefully to how you write your research objectives. Make sure that they align with the research questions. Make sure that they will deliver the research questions. Make sure that they are achievable within the time frame, and within the research design of a postdoctoral fellowship, and make sure that you can measure or at least account for how you will achieve them. The robustness of methodology is integral here, as it would be for any research proposal. So the soundness of the research methodology, specifically in terms of the concepts, the models, the assumptions, as with any research proposal, including the PhDs that you will have undertaken in order to be eligible for the postdoctoral fellowship, you'll have had to marry the research questions with the objectives, with the methods. So evaluators for the postdoctoral fellowships look very closely at the proposed methodology. Is it building on the established best practice in the field? Is it going beyond? And here there are a number of specific considerations which are very important to consider for a strong scoring in the postdoctoral fellowship. So first is interdisciplinary approaches in line with EU scientific priorities around interdisciplinarity. Please consider how are you adopting interdisciplinary approaches, or if there's not a rationale for interdisciplinary approaches, indicate how you've considered this, but decided that it isn't important. Or that it may be important, but it's not the best way to undertake your proposed research. It's integral to consider the gender dimension and other diversity aspects. If this is, of course, if relevant for the research project. My own area is in the Humanities and Social Sciences panel. And so for most of the projects that we would see or that would be seen by evaluators in that panel, we would expect to see gender and other diversity aspects considered in the research design. And we would be expecting to see them, say, in the composition of the research associates and the composition of advisors. I can't underline enough how important it is to consider these aspects. Similarly, open science is exceedingly important to consider, and regardless of the status of open science in your own field of research or how much it's discussed, consider how the findings can be made public, how they can be made accessible to industry, how would the IP operate, and how should the IP operate, and make sure that you've spelled out both how the project, how the data management would be organized to align with the EU open science practice priorities, and also how IP would be managed. It's very important to look at the training program. This is a postdoctoral fellowship with a heavy emphasis on career development, specifically the researcher's career development in both academic and potentially non-academic or professional areas. So the quality and the credibility of the training program is also significant in evaluation. This includes both academic training, but also areas like transferable skills. So having a deep consideration of what are the transferable skills which you could be learning through your host institution and any partner organizations. Are there multi or interdisciplinary or intersectoral skills that you could also be learning? So how might you use the postdoctoral fellowship to go beyond the training you've received in the PhD and your work to date to build yourself to build a very, very successful platform for your next steps. In the training, this is really where things like the supervision quality also become significant. So this is the next box here, the quality of the supervision. So what are the qualifications and the experience of the supervisor? Why is this proposed supervisor necessary, crucial, and the best supervisor or an ideal supervisor for the proposed research which you would conduct? Similarly, how would the supervisor's organization, how would they be, why is this the best place for you to conduct the research? And what kinds of training activities does the host institution offer? How would you take advantage of those? I can't stress this enough because the postdoctoral fellowship or that the postdoctoral fellowship is not only about setting you up for academic success, but for transferable success in industry, in public roles, in community roles, in a variety of roles beyond the academic sector. So this is very significant for evaluation. Together, those make up 50% of the evaluation score. The next category, impact, as I've said, is 30%. So here, a very important career becomes very important again here, as this top box indicates. Consider how the proposal would be strengthening European innovation capacity. So what is a meaningful contribution to the non-academic sector? This is where you think, so think very specifically around, this could be research translation, it could be commercialization, it could be community partnerships. This will really depend on your particular area of science and what is standard. But think about what in your research would be meaningful to industry or government or publics, and how, through the research design, will you make that happen? Okay, so think about what the contribution could be, and then think about how can you design a program which is not only disseminating the research, but actually involving engagement with potential end users outside academia. The credibility of the measures to enhance career perspectives and employability are again very important here. This goes back to transferable skills. And really important, and I can't emphasize this enough, is this third box, the suitability and quality of the measures to maximize expected outcomes and impact. So you will have a dissemination and exploitation plan. I think it's very easy to spend quite a lot of time on excellence and in building the partnership and the relationship with the proposed supervisor and host institution, and then not leaving enough time to consider the dissemination and exploitation and the maximizing the societal and economic impacts. But this is an important scored part of the evaluation process, so it is very important to consider that end user piece. And to consider also, and this is the bottom box in impact, what is the magnitude and importance of the project's contribution to the expected scientific, societal, and economic impacts? What might the societal impact be? What might the economic impact be? In the PhD and in other academic research work that you may have done, you'll be more likely to be very familiar with articulating the expected scientific impacts, right? This goes back to how the project will go beyond the state of the art. For the postdoctoral fellowships, articulating the expected societal and economic impacts is also integral. And it's really important here not to overstate. So consider what you can conceivably and practically accomplish within 2 years. Do not oversell, because the evaluators will spot that immediately. But equally, consider. And it can be something which is relatively small at first, but has the potential to have a greater impact coming out of the 2 years of work. This is, I think, an area which can be overlooked or not fully considered, but is an important part of the evaluation. The third, for 20% weighting, as I've said, is the implementation, so the quality and the efficiency of the implementation. A lot of this is around the work plan. So making sure that the plan of work corresponds to the methods, it corresponds to the objectives, it will deliver the research questions, it will also deliver those that societal and economic and scientific impact and benefit. Make sure that the quality of the deliverables and the milestones are very good. So make sure that the deliverables, again, will achieve that impact, scientific and economic and societal. Spend some time ensuring that the milestones are well thought out, that they will help you to progress, that they will help you to measure. Consider milestones that are pragmatic and operational as well as scientific. Risk assessment. Make sure that you have fully considered the potential risks of the project. Then this includes externalities, risks which are beyond your control, as well as risks which may occur within the research. Um, and make sure that the work packages, that appropriate effort is assigned to the work packages. So this is really around making sure that the delivery of the research is sensible, and that that will be good practice, are understood as good practice within your home discipline. Also, the quality, capacity, and role of each participant, including hosting arrangements, is very important. You may or may not be, sorry, so thinking about here, why not just why the supervisor, but why the host institution? What will the host institution provide in terms of, say, laboratory or experimental facilities, in terms of other research facilities? What will they provide in terms of support services? If you would be moving country, and most of you, I imagine, would be, given the design of the MCSA schemes, what kind of support is available to international postdoctoral fellows? What kind of support is available to early career researchers? Think holistically and broadly around and talk with the proposed supervisor about what the hosting arrangements would be, but also how can you find out about those support services? And think about the support services specifically in relation to your situation, as well as your science. Also important here is the capacity of the infrastructure, the logistics, and the facilities at your host. So not just what the host can offer, but does this match what you need for your science? And think about the consortium. So if you're considering additional hosting organizations, partner organizations, industry partners, consider the value of the consortium as a whole. Again, this is a very useful point at which to consider what might be missing. What might you need? What kind of expertise might you need to bring in to the consortium to make this a strong proposal? And this again will be scrutinized very carefully by the evaluators. Make sure that the Gantt chart, which you will include, matches the work plan. Okay, so a few top tips for a strong application. There's actually quite a lot in here. We may or may not have time to go through all of them, so I would really encourage you to go back and review the slide package, and you can also pause in the YouTube video to take some time with these top tips. So, and I've covered some of these already, but make sure it's clear how the proposed research methods deliver the research outcomes. Take time to understand the actual novelty and contribution of your project in relation to the state of the field in relevant disciplines. So if you are proposing an interdisciplinary research, make sure that it actually is beyond the state of the field in all of those disciplines, or if it might not be seen as if it might be seen as relatively well known as an approach, or knowledge which is relatively familiar or has been well trodden by other researchers in another discipline, explain why it's novel and necessary for your discipline to have this research undertaken. State all of this with accuracy and precision. Don't overclaim the innovation. Again, innovation can be relatively small, but it can be very, very significant in its small scale. So think about what you can feasibly do within 2 years and what does your discipline or area need. Take the time to build the relationship with the research supervisor and host institution that you're proposing to work with. This is about taking the time up front to build that relationship, which then means that when you go to write the application, you'll have a lot of this information already, and the evaluators are able to tell whether an application has been worked on closely between the supervisor and host institution and the applicant or not. And that really comes through in that question around alignment. Right, so ensure that the information about your research and your ambitions aligns with the supervisors, and aligns with that collective expertise of the research community and the host institution. And ensure that you're very, very clear how the postdoctoral fellowship would produce mutual learning. What would you contribute to the host institution, as well as how would the host institution contribute to your own intellectual growth? Ensure that the application fully addresses all of the priorities. I've mentioned this. And make sure that as part of this that you include how you would manage IP. Ensure that you address ethics directly if this is relevant. And again, ethics will be relevant for work in some panels more than others, but if it is relevant, if you would be using community data, make sure that you address it. If your proposal would involve human data, especially community data, interact with community leaders in advance to gain consent and identify requests or preferences so that would be designing the research program in a way that community members or stakeholders can shape the direction of research before, or so that it's evident in the proposal that you have already done this step or that this is directly designed into the research program. Spend time to develop a full and coherent professional development plan. Fully and carefully consider the impact. I've discussed this already. And just to note that impact is the actual take up or response to your work, not its sharing or dissemination. So a proposal which says that a website will be created could be evaluated as less strong than a proposal which has a series of staged engagements with stakeholders. So take up and response to the work is impact, right? Making something public would less qualify as impact. So consider how you might integrate impact and evaluation into the research design and delivery. Identify and name as communities the end users or stakeholders. Consider why the research will matter to them. Consider how you will evaluate the impact. And as I've said already, clearly communicate that impact without minimizing or exaggerating. And in terms of implementation, reserve time at the end of the process to make sure that the Gantt chart matches the narrative project plan and make sure that you fully and carefully consider potential risks and how you would mitigate them. That has been a very, very quick fly through of the evaluation process and the criteria. I hope that it was helpful, and please do go back and refer to the slides as you prepare your application. All best wishes for your application.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. I think that was extraordinary. And we can see the remarks coming up also on the Q&A and chat about how clearly you have articulated everything. So thank you very much for doing that. We really value all the insights that you have provided. You'll see that there are a lot of questions which Christina has already been responding. But while Christina is responding, if you have an opportunity, feel free to write them. If you want to take these questions live, we can take them live as well. So I think it gives us perfect segue to Christina. Christina, the floor is all yours to explain how do we go about the part A, part B, and then of course your tips on this. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nishan. Thank you very much. Actually, I think my life, it's much easier now because, I mean, Professor Sarah explained everything excellently. So I think I will focus. I just took some notes for some additional aspects from my perspective, but I'm just going to concentrate on more the administrative part, how the project looked like, how the proposal looked like, because I think in terms of evaluation and process, I think it's really, really clear. So thank you very much for that perfect presentation. So I'm just gonna share my screen. Perfect. So from my side, and now that you know all about the evaluation criteria and how a proposal needs to be written, I think it's the time for you also to understand how the process works. What is this funding and tender portals? Where everything is taking place, because everything takes place online. So basically, when we talk about part B, part B1, B2, and part A as well, and how does this look like? So we are talking about the most popular call from Horizon Europe. It was the case also from Horizon 2020. This is the postdoctoral fellowships. Last year there were over 1,700 proposals. I don't know what this is going to be like this year, but please be aware that you are actually the most competitive and the most popular call of Horizon Europe. So the call, the deadline is September 2026. If for those of you who saw the first webinar on eligibility criteria, all is met at the deadline of the call, and this is important. So maybe just to go back on some of the MSCA features, and I will try to relate this on how this is included in the proposal and the different evaluation criteria and sub-criteria. We are talking here postdoctoral fellowships. So for postdoctoral candidates, we have a maximum of 8 years of research experience. And the idea is to train them to improve their skills, both from a scientific but also from a transferable perspective, and allow to grow in their career development. It is about excellence. The evaluation criteria already say that this is 50% of the project, but there is an order when you apply for this, and you have specific panels that you need to submit your proposal to. So this fellowship will allow you to move country, to work with different sectors, to think a bit outside of the box, work with industry, with NGOs, with hospitals, with many different actors where a researcher can pursue his or her career. The idea here is that the beneficiaries who receive the funding will provide the researchers with very good and attractive working conditions to enable them to grow during the execution of the project with a very strong and robust career development plan. So these will have an impact on the researcher's career, an impact to the person, but also to the organization and, of course, to the R&I field that is being funded. And of course, as we mentioned, the ideal thing about these kind of fellowships is the possibility to really work in different environments during the project. So now you have decided that you want to apply for the fellowship, and you have to go to the funding and tenders portal, because this is where everything happens. This you can see a screenshot for the 2025, but everything is in order now. And the 2026 call is already open, and you can see all this information here. You have an internal navigation path where you will see the topic description, any updates, the general information, all the condition and documents, the budget overview. Also, in case of those who are still looking for institutions where they want to do these fellowship, there's also these partner search announcements. And Q&A section. So the main two documents, there are many others, but the main two documents for you to start working on your proposal are the guide for applicants and also the standard application form. So you don't need to really start submission before looking at them, because they're available for you openly on the portal. Therefore, this is just for you to have an idea of what they look like. This is the guide for applicants that gives you information not only on eligibility criteria, secondments, non-academic placement, all that is possible within the fellowship, but also it gives you the format. Okay, you need to innovate in your idea, but not in the format, because this is very well explained, and the template is there available for you. So instructions on how to fill it in, the page size, the margins, the reference fonts, everything is already settled for you in this guide for applicants. And the information is also again available in the application forms. This will give you also the look and feel of all these 10 pages that you will complete, and that Professor Sarah already talked about in terms of excellence, impact, and implementation. So all the nitty-gritty of what is requested when writing the proposal. Therefore, you will see that if you have, you can download those documents, they're available for you, but to start preparing the proposal and to start writing it, you need to register and start submission, okay? So you can do that as a researcher, or the institution who's going to host you can do that as well. The important is that you include your details. You have the institutional participant identification codes that you need to include as well, the PIC. And you need to choose one of the two modes that you're going to go for. This is already one of the questions that were raised in the Q&A section. There are two implementation modes, the European fellowships and the global fellowships. You need to choose one of them. You cannot go for the two. You have to choose one. And this is important because once you select and you start the submission, this cannot be changed. You can overwrite many things in the funding and tenders portal, but not the mode that you choose it. So then you select either your global fellowship or your European fellowship, and then you start. This is the page that you're going to land in to start creating your proposal. So you see there's the possibility to look for the peak name of the institution, and you will also see that there are different roles in the proposal, okay? As a researcher who has the idea and who is thinking of the project and the person who would be recruited by the institution, the supervisor, who is normally the main contact for the institution that will be beneficiary of the grants, and also maybe contact persons from the EU grants officers that are part of the institution. So what I want to stress here is that you as a researcher can upload the information and can submit the proposal, but it always has to be done in collaboration with the institution, or the institution maybe has the internal strategy to submit themselves the proposal. So this is the information that you will see online when you start preparing this application. So once you are online, you can download the template, the Part B session, that will allow you to start writing the PDF B1 and B2. So these are the two different parts of the proposal structure. Part 8, which is more administrative, and this is done online, and Part B, the technical one, but this has been explained really in details by Professor Sarah, so I won't really take too much time to talk about those ones. These are just some screenshots that show you how the system works, but I want to concentrate on the main ones. You will be able to edit the forms, okay, to include the different details in the different sections that are asked by you to be filled in. Let's start with Part A, that, as you can see, has 5 different sections for you to fill in terms more of administrative information or general information. Now, I know people normally focus on Part B, which is the scientific and the technical proposal, but please don't neglect that this also takes time. It is important in this case, for example, that you have the support of the institution that you're going to be applying with to help you filling in. Normally, it's more the institution who fills this information. Here, when we talk about general information, it's already been mentioned the way MSCA works. It's a bottom-up project, a program, but obviously there is an order and you need to choose your panel when you submit the proposal. Not only you choose your panel between one of the 8 scientific panels, but you are also allowed and asked to choose a scientific descriptor, up to 5. And this will give the idea to the European Commission and the Research Executive Agency what kind of experts will be looking at your proposal. So again, this is not to be neglected. It is important to show which is the scientific panel you're looking at, but also to give the information to the Commission to really appoint the right experts. If your project, for example, is really interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, you can really include this information in the different descriptors that you're going to be showing. So you have here the information of the acronym. Please remember the acronym is going to be with you in your scientific life forever. So try to choose one that is comprehensible. The proposal title, and again, the scientific area and the scientific descriptors. When we talk about the abstract, this is not a scientific one. The idea here is that you need to be concise, but you need to provide enough information on the overview of the project. Therefore, what is the overall research theme? What are your research objectives? And also training objectives, because it has been mentioned already, this is a research and training program. And of course, any potential that this can have. And why are we saying that this is not a scientific abstract? Because if your project is funded, this information will be uploaded on Cordis. Therefore, if you have any sensitive information, try to not include it here. This is also the section where the Commission will ask you if your proposal has been submitted before in previous year. So you will have to include here this information. Then comes the part of the participants. This is information of the participating organization. So what you see here is actually just a screenshot from a test that was done years ago by us, a Spanish NCP at the time. And it shows, in this case, the case of a global fellowship. So you see the information of the Spanish institution, the beneficiary in Spain, but also the partner, or the associated partner in the United States, so hosting the outgoing phase of the global fellowship. And in this case, this fellowship, this global fellowship has also an extension in the form of a non-academic placement in a Spanish institutions up to 3 months after, let's say, the end of the project. And this is the information that goes in here. It is important to know that in part A, you only need to include the information in terms of the beneficiary, and in case of a global fellowship, the associated partner, and in the case of a non-academic placement, this information of the non-academic institutions. But here in part A, you do not include the information on secondments. If there are any secondments in your project. This goes in part B and in part B2. So this is just for you to see a little bit the content of what it's going to be asked for you to fill in, the information on the supervisor and the departments where the institution, where the project is going to take place. Then there's also the part where you as a researcher will include your information on your eligibility. It means that here you will be able to say your research experience, if it's more than these 8 years, and there could be exceptions. This is the table that you will be able to include information on the reasons why you have more than 8 years to ensure that you are eligible for the project. It would also ask you information on your place of residence to ensure that you comply with the mobility rule. Again, there's also a part in the participants when you are requested to include information on the publications. And sometimes there are questions, who are these publications from? It can be both from the host institutions, but also from the researchers. They have to be related with the proposal. Here in this section, you also have a concept that is called the Gender Equality Plan. This is an eligibility criteria, and it's compulsory for the public bodies, higher institution establishment, and research organizations from the member states and associated countries, the beneficiaries in Europe. Therefore, please be aware that this has to be a yes when the grant agreement is signed. Then the budget, and this is very automatic, so you don't really need to worry too much about it. The system will calculate it. It's very easy. This is just a screenshot, but it is dating from before 2026, so please be aware that the information on the living allowance cost is not updated, okay? But this is for you to understand that the final budget will depend on the number of months that you are carrying out in the project, but also the country that you are going to, because there's a different country coefficient that is applied. And in the case if you have family allowance or not, it would also change. So here what you can see is the outgoing phase outside of Europe in the States for 2 years, the final phase in Spain for 12 months, and then a non-academic placement in Spain for, again, 3 months at the end of the project. And this gives you the final information on budget for your project. In this case, it was over 300,000 euros for this one. Professor Sarah already explained that you need to inform how you're going to manage your ethics within the project. This is done in part B2, but there's also a self-assessment at the beginning in part A, where you will be able to also click this information in your project and expand a little bit in this ethics self-assessment form. The last part of the part A, which is the administrative part, is related to what we call other questions, very specific questions. For example, if you are dealing with fusion, nuclear fusion, and you're eligible to apply for one of the Euratom areas, you can include this information here. For example, if you're applying with a widening country, you do not see here because Spain is not a widening country, but if you are applying with a widening country in Europe, it's also possible for you to ask for the possibility to get what we call the second chance with the ERA fellowships. This is the time to ask for it. And you might be aware that in case your project is very well funded, is very well reviewed, but does not manage to get funded, so it gets above 85%. It's what we call a seal of excellence, and maybe in some countries or in some institutions, you will be able to get funding directly. So in case this happens, you will be asked by the Commission to give your consent to give this information to national funding institutions. So once you finish completing part A, then you can start also preparing part B1 and B2, download the PDFs that will then allow you to work on them and upload it at the end of this session and submit them, okay? You have the final button to submit. Do it before the deadline. This is one of the main recommendations. Don't wait until the 9th of September, because sometimes the IT systems, imagine 17,000 proposals going together at the same time, it can cause problems. So do this before the deadline. You can overwrite many aspects of the proposal over and over again, so don't leave it for the last minute. Part B1 and Part B2. This is what you will see, and you have 10 pages to convince the evaluators about the excellence, the impact, and the implementation of your project. Part B2, which doesn't really have a page limit, it has in some of its subsections. This is where you will include the CV of the researcher, the information of the participating institutions in the institutional tables. You will be able to elaborate further in ethical aspects on security and screening, or also in environmental consideration. And if you have global fellowship, you will include the letter of commitment for the outgoing phase. Now, I had some slides, but they have been covered actually by Sarah, so I won't repeat myself, because actually we had the similar slides. I just wanted to mention maybe one or two aspects, and then because I think we are just 5 minutes left in the project. So I mean, everything was so clearly explained. I wrote down some things. One that I think it's really important, and Sarah already mentioned it, and it's when it comes to gender aspects. I know it can be maybe seen that the social sciences is the panel where these will take place more, in a more recurrent way, but it's not always the case. I mean, normally gender, it's just, you have to think about it before, because in many cases you can include gender in your R&I methodology to really enrich the impact and the results. If the project results will impact differently a woman, a man, an elderly person, a child, this is also diversity and gender, and you need to include this in your research methodology. So I just wanted to point that out. And then the second part, and it's also related to excellence in the sense that, for example, the criteria 1.4 that looks at the researchers is normally looked at together with the Part B2, the CV of the research of the researchers. So you need to be very coherent with your these two sections, okay? Because the evaluators will really have a look at section 1.4, trying to understand and to see if you are the suitable researcher to conduct the activities that are foreseen in the program. But please keep this coherent with what you have in your CV as a researcher. And also in terms of training, we've mentioned that training is really relevant in these R&I projects, but the training will have to be personalized. One thing is what the institution can offer you in terms of scientific and transferable skills, but the career development plan is actually for this, to see and try to match your needs as a researcher, and those will appear in the CV possibly, and also what you have included here with your proposed goals in the part 1.4. One thing also about the match, and I think this is important, the match between the supervisor and the researcher. There needs to be this mutual learning that Sarah already mentioned. This is really essential. In some cases, people say, oh, but I don't have an excellent CV. Can I apply for this? But it's not only about your CV, it's about matching your CV with with your needs, but also with with what you can provide to the institution and vice versa. So this complementary match is really, really important. And just maybe some last words, again, dissemination, communication and exploitation. Sometimes there's still a mix, and researchers, I think the scientific part is always the one that is best written, because this is what you do every day. But when it comes to impact, you have to remember that you have different audiences. Therefore, you will have different channels to communicate not only your result, but also your project. So it is about communicating to the society in large to make them understand why funding science is so relevant to their daily lives. So you will have to reach out to society, to children, with, different outreach activities, apart from disseminating to your scientific colleague, to your peers, and also try to think if your research can be exploitable. Think about your end users and how you can engage with all these stakeholders within all the project life cycle. Then again, impacts were explained in terms of the differences. Obviously, you're always going to have scientific impacts because you are contributing to the state of the art. You will generate new knowledge. You can improve an equipment, a protocol, an infrastructure. But depending on the project, and this is what you need to think about and really align and do some research. What's going on also in EU level, the different missions, the big initiatives in your areas, for example, the roadmaps. Try to align this with your project and to see, the added value and why this project needs to be funded. And of course, then you will maybe think about other impacts such as the economic, the technological ones, but also the societal impacts that are very, very important. And when we talk about implementation, it's always European jargon. I think we know this. Once one person has prepared one project, they know what a milestone is, what a deliverable is, what a Gantt chart is. And this is something very visual where an evaluator will be able to spot very quickly if you have too many work packages, if they're really just, narrowed to one period and it's not feasible to really deliver the results. So ideally, it's about showing the Commission that they're going to give you resources and that you will be efficient in delivering your activities. Then I talk about the features, the MSEA features, all of them need to be included in the project, okay? And this is just the specific sub-criteria where you can find information on training, obviously under excellence and impact. The excellence is part of and is the main evaluation criteria, but all the rest are embedded in those proposals. One quick aspect, and Sarah already mentioned, you really see when you pre-screen and when you review a proposal that has been done, although this is an individual project, that has been done in collaboration with the host institution. Why? Because there's a lot of information that is dependent on the institution here. And also you have to see the feedback from the supervisor in many aspects, and this needs to be embedded in the proposal. All expectations need to be covered here. Reads, you need to do a lot of reading. There's a lot of EU initiatives, strategic documents that you need to be aware when preparing, apart from your own scientific fields. Try to involve the national contact points in your country destination. Many of them provide also, pre-screening services, and try to get your peers to read your project. Sometimes when somebody is writing a very theoretical mathematic project, why not giving this to a social science scientist to see if really the overview is really well understood. And again, I mentioned this at the beginning, do not innovate with the format. The format is there. Download the last one from the 2026 call because there can be changes. And it will be a pity if you lose points just because you didn't have the right format. And please think that these evaluators read 10, 13, 15 proposals, depending on the panel. So try to make their life easier. Sometimes an image is worth 1,000 words, and this is important. You need to make things attractive and visual. Be accurate, be rigorous, but think that they're different. They're coming from very different also fields. Sometimes, obviously, they have the expertise, but you need to package a little bit what you're saying. This is just a reference for you to important strategic documents that you need to be aware of when writing your proposal. And lastly, just some useful resources. Of course, the funding tenders portal. This is where you will submit your project, so you need to be aware of the website. Radiance is a national contact point project that includes a lot of useful material, handbooks, information on how to submit your proposal. And of course, Euraxis Australia, New Zealand nation, there's a lot of dissemination, communication, information sessions for you to be aware of the novelties of the programs. And I always finish when I was an XCP, but still nowadays with the same quote from Marie Curie, Maria Salomea Sklodowska-Curie, who said that nothing in life is to be feared, it's only to be understood. So I hope together, all of us, we managed to give you some information on the program and really encourage you to go for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. I think that was, again, another extraordinary set of intervention. I think, Sarah, and you built up a very excellent team and covered everything that really needed to be covered in the application advice webinar. I think it's one of my favorite webinars. I've been running webinars for I don't know how long, but yeah, I didn't want it to be finishing, but I am aware that we are already above the 1 hour mark. But for those who are joining us, I did manage to ask them if they could stay for 10 more minutes. So they will be with us for 10 more minutes to respond to your questions. I see that almost half the questions were already been written, answered. And so thank you for that as well, Sarah and Christina, for doing that. Perfect. Thank you. No, I can see that there are a few more questions that might not have been answered, but if you feel that your questions are unanswered and they're really pressing and you do not get them on the presentations that were delivered, do not hesitate to send us an email and we'll try to respond to them in writing, because I'm very conscious of the timing that we had requested from our speakers. So with that, please join me in thanking Sarah and Christina for generously sharing their time, expertise, and practical advice with us. I'm sure that our audience found the session both insightful and extremely useful for preparing a competitive postdoctoral fellowship application. As you exit the webinar, you will see 2 short survey questions. We'd really appreciate if you could take your moment and complete them, because your feedback helps us improve future sessions. And before I close, I'd also encourage you to please keep an eye on Euraccess Australia and New Zealand social media channels for updates on upcoming webinars, funding opportunities, and news from European research and innovation landscape. I think with that, this brings us to the end of today's session. And thank you once again for joining us. And we wish you all the very best with your future application. I hope to get some emails from you saying that I was successful in a postdoctoral fellowship, which we have been very happy to receive this year and the previous year as well. So thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, Sarah, Christina, for your time. It has been a pleasure.
Goodbye. Have a good day.
Good luck, everyone.